The late autumn wind, carrying a few withered yellow fallen leaves, poured in through the half-open carved window lattice of the general's mansion. Shen Ruwei sat on the warm kang by the window, holding a bowl of pitch black medicinal soup that emitted billowing bitter fumes. The thick medicinal liquid swirled at the bottom of the bowl, giving off an intensely bitter smell so strong it was almost suffocating, acrid enough to make one's eyes water. "Madam, quickly drink it while it is hot." Her personal maid choir attentively offered a small plate of candied fruit, her face unable to hide her joy, as if what was in the bowl wasn't medicine, but some kind of heavenly nectar that could transform a person entirely. "This is a secret family recipe. The general specially had someone seek out from the southern borderlands, brought from thousands of miles away. They say it is the best for regulating Madam's health and helping you conceive a legitimate son soon." The general's devotion to Madam. You couldn't find a second one like it in all of the capital, even with a lantern. I didn't say anything. I only lowered my head, quietly staring at the medicinal liquid swaying in the bowl. The pitch black surface reflected a face. That woman's complexion was pale as paper, her lips without a trace of color, and her eyes, which should have been clear and lively, were now covered with a lingering deathly pallor. Clearly only just past 26, in the prime of her life like a flower, yet she'd been ground down alive into a withered piece of wood. In my past life, that is how it was. I took that bowl of so-called womb, warming medicine with a heart full of joy, even with tears of gratitude. I drank it for a full 5 years, over 1,800 days and nights, not missing a single bowl. Each time after drinking it, that overwhelming bitterness would make my stomach cramp, and I'd vomit until my whole body went weak. But every single time, Lu Heng would appear behind me right on cue, using those warm, strong hands of his to gently embrace my shoulders that trembled slightly from dry heaving, pulling my entire body into his broad chest. He would lower his head, his warm breath brushing past my ear, and murmur in that deep magnetic voice of his, "Ruwei, you have a delicate constitution. It is my fault for not taking better care of you. We're not in a rush, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. As long as you stay by my side safe and healthy, it doesn't matter whether we have children or not. You are the most important person in my life." Lu Heng's life. Back then, I was moved to tears. I genuinely believed I had married the best man in the world. Even when Lu Heng's mother, that sharp-tongued old hag Lady Lu, pointed at my nose in front of dozens of maids and servants throughout the entire estate, and cursed me with the most grating words, calling me a useless woman whose belly shows no sign of life after being married in for so long, and that money-losing burden from the Shen family. I still gritted my teeth and stood up for myself. I knelt on the cold bluestone floor, shielding Lu Heng from all his mother's fury and curses, kowtowing as I said, "Mother, please calm your anger. It is your daughter. In-law's body that is failing. It has nothing to do with Heng. I beg you, please don't make things difficult for Heng. Your daughter, in-law, will definitely work harder on recuperating and won't let down the Lu family's expectations." I thought my devotion and forbearance would one day be rewarded as they should be. I thought as long as I was good enough, virtuous enough, considerate enough, this man would treat me well for the rest of his life. Until that dusk before my death. That day, the sunset outside the window was like half the sky on fire, casting my plain and simple bedroom in a blood-red glow. I was already terminally ill, aching in every part of my body, barely having the strength left to lift my eyelids. Just then, the bedroom door was pushed open. Lu Heng led in a woman with lingering charm and luxurious clothing, along with a pair of adorable twin boy and girl around 3 or 4 years old, all standing neatly in front of my sick bed. That woman was Liu Yiyi, Lu Heng's childhood sweetheart who grew up with him. The old acquaintance he claimed had long ago married and moved away, having nothing to do with him anymore. Liu Yiyi was wearing a shoe brocade dress from Suzhou's finest workshop, something I could never bear to wear in my entire life. The red gold phoenix, headed hairpins swaying in her hair bun, was actually the very one that had been missing from my dowry for years. She stood before me, the corners of her mouth curved in a smug and mean smile. As she said in a delicate, affected voice, those words I could never forget until my death. "Sister, thanks to you drinking that bowl of womb, warming medicine diligently every single day for the past 5 years. You made room so that my child could grow up safely and soundly under Brother Hang's protection. Now that Brother Hang has been enthafofed as the Marquis of Jingyuan for his military achievements, bringing glory to the entire household at the height of its power, it is time for you to retire with honor. Sister, just peacefully hand over this position of lady of the house to me." My head went buzz. And in that moment, I finally understood everything. What womb, warming medicine, what secret formula from the southern frontier. That bowl of stuff I'd been drinking for 5 years was, from beginning to end, nothing but a contraceptive decoction to prevent pregnancy. It was Liu Heng who personally prepared the prescription and had Queer brew it for me to drink every day, while he gently held me and said, "There is no rush." He was secretly ensuring that I could never conceive his child in this lifetime. And he and Liu Yi had long been keeping her as his mistress outside, even having children together. 5 years of bitter medicine, 5 years of waiting, 5 years of humiliation and grievances I endured for him in front of my mother-in-law. It was all just part of his carefully orchestrated scheme to fatten up his true love while wearing down his legitimate wife. I mustered my last bit of strength, trying to struggle up from my sick, wanting to confront him. But Liu Heng, the man I loved with my entire youth, the man I entrusted with everything I had, merely held Liu Yi in his arms and swept his gaze over me with the cold indifference one would show a stranger. Rowei. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing an extremely cruel smile. "You are not worthy. You were never worthy of bearing my child, Liu Heng's child. You are not worthy." I died choking on immense hatred and resentment. And now, I took a deep breath, pushing those heart-wrenching memories from my past life back down, bit by bit, into the deepest recesses of my chest. My fingertips pressed slightly harder, and the black medicinal liquid in the bowl rippled faintly from my movement. "Madam?" Queer called out to me somewhat strangely, probably thinking I'd been staring at the medicine bowl in a daze for far too long today. I slowly raised my head. What came into Queer's view was no longer that submissive, obedient Shen Rowei. In her place were eyes as cold as ice and as deep as an abyss, as if they harbored 10,000 years of frost. "Pour it out." Queer froze, thinking she had misheard. "Madam, this was specifically instructed by the general. This servant got up early and watched over the medicine pot for 2 hours to brew it properly." I said, "Pour it out." My voice wasn't loud, and my pace was even slower than usual. But every word seemed to squeeze out from between my teeth, carrying an indisputable, spine-chilling pressure. Quire was startled by my sudden, imposing manner and shivered, almost instinctively reaching out with both hands to take the medicine bowl from my hands. "Wait?" I stopped her. I threw off the covers, got down from the heated kang, and walked barefoot to the pot of brilliantly blooming peonies by the window. Then, I personally took back that medicine bowl from Quire's hands. Under Quire's dumbfounded gaze, he poured that bowl of conception, preventing decoction, which was supposed to go into my stomach and ruin my entire life, evenly onto the soil of the peony plant, not leaving a single drop. "Watch this pot of flowers closely," I instructed Quire indifferently. "In 3 days, you'll know what this so-called womb-warming medicine really is." 3 days later, the peony flowers that had been as vibrant as rosy clouds began to yellow and curl from the edges of their leaves, and the petals withered and fell off one by one. Finally, the entire plant rotted from the roots, gave off a pungent odor, and died completely. Quire looked at the dead flowers. Her face turned deathly pale with fear. Her legs went weak, and she collapsed to her knees on the ground, trembling all over like a sieve. "Madam, now you know." I crouched down and looked calmly at Quayer's terrified face. What you've been brewing for me to drink with your own hands every day. What you call the general's deep affection. This is the fate of that potted flower. Starting today, you have two paths. I held up two fingers. First, continue being Lu Heng's informant, monitoring me drinking the medicine for him every day. But I can guarantee you, when the truth comes out one day, you'll be the first person thrown out to take the blame. Second, from now on, recognize only me as your master. You'll continue reporting to Lu Heng about me drinking the medicine as usual. But what you report will be what I teach you to say. Queer trembled as she raised her head, looking at my eyes that were cold to the extreme yet somehow inexplicably reassuring, and kowtowed heavily with a loud thud. This servant recognizes only Madam as my master. Very good. I stood up, walked back to the window, looked at the square patch of sky outside the general's residence, and the corners of my mouth curved into a meaningful arc. In this life, Lu Heng, you will no longer be that silent lamb you can slaughter at will. I want to see how you dig your own grave with your own hands in this tender trap. From that day on, my transformation was as gentle and imperceptible as a spring rain. Outwardly, I remained that gentle, virtuous, and utterly harmless Shen Roe. Every day I took my medicine on time. Quire had long since secretly switched it out for ordinary bitter health tonic, inquired after Lu Heng's well-being, and acted meek and submissive before my mother-in-law. But in secret, I began a meticulous plan that would span several months. First, the very first thing I had to do was figure out Lu Heng's trump card. Memories from my previous life told me that the reason Lu Heng went to such lengths to make me drink that contraceptive brew wasn't simply because he'd fallen for someone else. He had a fatal secret he'd hidden for years, one that absolutely could not be known by anyone. He had a congenital deficiency. His essence was unstable, and fundamentally he could never have children of his own blood. The distinguished Marquis of Jingyuan, a general of 100 battles, was actually someone unable to continue his family line. If this secret were leaked, not only would his official career collapse instantly, but the Lu family's 3-generation single-hair lineage would become the biggest laughingstock in all the capital. So he needed a virtuous, legitimate wife to cover for him. And I, Shen Roe, with my respectable family background, gentle temperament, and generous dowry, was simply the perfect shield sent from heaven. He used a bowl of contraceptive soup to shut me up, claiming to outsiders that it was my poor health that prevented us from having children, perfectly shifting all the blame onto me. As for Liu Yi and those twin siblings, they were another brilliant scheme he came up with to continue the Lu family bloodline, secretly arranging for an outsider to carry out the task of continuing his lineage. As for who exactly that person was who did this for him, I never found out even until my death in my previous life. But in this life, I have plenty of time and plenty of patience. The second thing I did was to regain control of the Shen family's dowry. When I married, the dowry father gave me was extremely generous. 88 loads of dowry items, including 3 shops in prime locations in the capital, 500 mu of fertile land outside the city, as well as 2 full chests of gold and silver jewelry and antique calligraphy and paintings. In my previous life, all these things were appropriated by Lu Heng under various pretexts, ultimately all thrown into the bottomless pit of maintaining his troops and keeping Liu Yi. In this life, he took back the household management authority bit by bit from old Lady Liu under the guise of learning household management. At the same time, I secretly sent my own trusted confidants to quietly transfer all the property deeds for those 3 shops and the land documents from the dowry out of the Liu family's storage and into the secret chamber of the Shen family's ancestral home. Completing all this took me a full 2 months, and during these 2 months, Lu Heng's attitude toward me remained the same as always. Gentle, considerate, caring in every way. This evening, he came back from the military camps, still carrying a faint, almost imperceptible sweet and cloying fragrance. It was the scent of that osmanthus hair oil that Liu Yi habitually used. Rue, have you taken your medicine today? As soon as he entered the room, he intimately opened his arms, wanting to embrace my shoulders from behind. I deftly turned around, walked to the table and picked up the teapot, imperceptibly avoiding his touch. I have. I smiled gently and gracefully, handing him a cup of freshly brewed Junshan silver needle tea. It was quite bitter. Today's medicine seems even more concentrated than usual. Lu Heng took the teacup, noticing the flash of coldness in my eyes. He took a sip of tea, and instead sighed with some guilt. I've made you suffer. Though this prescription is bitter, the physician said that as long as you persist with the treatment, there will surely be good news. Rowei, rest assured. In this lifetime, Lu Heng will never let you down. Will never let me down. I sneered inwardly. You said these exact words in my previous life, word for word. Heng Lang is right. Rue can wait. I lowered my eyes and obediently responded. But in my heart I was rapidly calculating the next move in my plan. Since you set a gentle trap for me that lasted 5 years, I'll return the favor in kind, using an even deeper, bigger, and more elaborate scheme to bury you and your white moonlight together in the pit. You dug yourselves, the opportunity has finally come. 1 month later, at the Lu family banquet. According to custom, on the 1st and 15th of every month, everyone in the household must gather in the main hall for a meal. It is called a family banquet. But in reality, it is old Madame Lu's regular performance to inspect her daughters-in-law and demonstrate her mother-in-law authority. I personally cooked a whole table of dishes that old Madame Lu loves to eat. Among them, the bowl of rock sugar bird's nest porridge was something I got up early in the morning to make, stewing it by hand for 2 hours. Old Madame Lu held the bird's nest porridge, eating with relish, yet her mouth was like it had been coated with thorns, endlessly criticizing me without a moment's rest. Rowei, you've been married into our Lu family for quite some years now. How is it that your belly still shows no signs of activity? Our Lu family has been passed down through 3 generations with only 1 heir each. Our lineage is dwindling. If the family line is cut off with you, you'll be the eternal sinner of the Lu family. Lu Heng sat in the master's chair at the head seat, leisurely raising his cup to drink alone, as if his mother's harsh and bitter words had absolutely nothing to do with him. In my previous life, at times like this, I would only blush with shame and lower my head in apology with tears in my eyes. But in this life, I put down my chopsticks, unhurriedly dabbed the corners of my mouth with a handkerchief, my expression as calm as a deep pool of still water. Mother's admonishment is right. Your daughter-in-law also feels that after adjusting this body for so long without any improvement, it must be that the prescription is not acclimated and doesn't suit your daughter-in-law's constitution. As I spoke, I seemingly casually glanced at Lu Heng. Lu Heng's movement of bringing food to his mouth paused slightly. I continued. So your daughter-in-law took it upon herself some days ago to specially invite old Dr. Zhou from the capital's rejuvenation hall, the very one who took the Empress Dowager's pulse, that miracle doctor, to have him examine your daughter-in-law as well, to see if there is any hidden illness. Lu Heng's hand clearly stiffened for a moment, his knuckles gripping the chopsticks turning slightly pale. A trace of extremely subtle panic flashed through his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. For such matters, why trouble outsiders? He put down his chopsticks, his tone trying hard to maintain indifference. That prescription from the southern borderlands was personally obtained by me from a renowned physician. It is already the best. Although the doctors at Rejuvenation Hall are famous, they may not necessarily understand the medical arts of the southern borderlands. The implication in his words was that he didn't want any doctor to examine my body, because he was afraid someone would discover the truth. Heng Lang is right. I smiled and nodded compliantly, then changed the subject. However, today your daughter-in-law does have a matter of great joy to report to Mother and Heng Lang. I raised my hand and clapped twice lightly. The side door of the main hall opened in response. A middle-aged man, who looked like a steward, leading a young woman dressed in a light cyan silk dress with delicate features and a meek demeanor, slowly walked in. As soon as the woman entered, she dropped to her knees with a thud and began crying like pear blossoms in the rain. Young Master Lu, Yi Yi truly has no other choice. If I cannot see you, Yi Yi won't know how to go on living. The person who came was none other than Liu Yi, and her slightly swollen belly was precisely the key piece that would collapse this entire game. At this moment, the air in the entire main hall seemed to be instantly sucked dry. Lu Heng's complexion, the instant he saw Liu Yi, became even paler than the first snow falling outside the window. He abruptly stood up, his chair making a harsh scraping sound against the floor, and the wine cup in his hand nearly fell to the ground. Wei. You? He looked at me, his eyes filled with extreme complexity, both the panic of having his secret exposed and the bewilderment at my sudden move. I didn't look at him, but simply walked forward gently and personally helped Liu Yi, who was kneeling on the ground, to her feet. Miss Liu, please don't kneel anymore. Be careful not to harm yourself and the child in your belly. My voice was as gentle as the spring breeze of March, holding her hand and even intimately wiping away the tear stains on her face. Then, I turned around, facing the dumbfounded old lady Liu and the ashen-faced Lu Heng, and said something that shocked everyone present. Mother, I have something to tell you. A few days ago, when I was purchasing silk at the fabric shop in the south of the city, I happened to meet a destitute woman. After some conversation, I learned that she was actually Heng's childhood sweetheart, who grew up with him, Miss Liu Yi, due to misfortune in her family. She was separated from Heng for many years. What delighted me even more was that Miss Yi is already carrying Heng's child over 2 months along. I paused deliberately here, leaving enough time for this bombshell news to explode in everyone's hearts. Mother worries about the Liu family's bloodline continuation day and night. Now that such joyous news has fallen from the heavens, isn't this a great blessing? Although old lady Liu was harsh and snobbish, upon hearing there was a child, those originally shrewd and mean triangular eyes instantly lit up. For an old lady who valued bloodline continuation as much as life itself, having a grandson was more important than anything. Hengeris, is this true? Her voice trembled with excitement. Lu Heng was backed into a corner. He never imagined that the matter of Liu Yi's pregnancy would be exposed in this manner. On this occasion, his original plan was to wait until I had drunk enough contraceptive tea and fallen ill, then gloriously install Liu Yi as the legitimate wife, announcing to the public that the child was born after remarrying. And now, I've personally pushed Liu Yi to the forefront, leaving him stuck between a rock and a hard place. He opened his mouth, and after a long pause, finally forced out a barely passable excuse. Mother, Yi is ... indeed my childhood sweetheart. We lost contact when her family met with disaster. Who would have thought she'd be pregnant? I timely handed him another knife. I stood up and respectfully walked before Lu Heng, took his hand, and placed Liu Yi's hand in his palm. In front of old lady Liu, and all the household stewards, maids, and servants, I spoke the words that would humiliate Lu Heng most in this lifetime. Since the general and Miss Liu are in love with each other, unable to forget your past romance, and Miss Liu is already pregnant, this is a match blessed by heaven. For our Yue family, having children to carry on the family line is the most important matter. I looked at Lu Heng's face, slightly contorted from shock and complex emotions, with a gentle smile on my lips that sent chills down his spine. Rest assured, General, Rue is not the jealous type. I will personally arrange Miss Yi's entry into our household properly, ensuring she suffers not the slightest grievance. Lu Heng stared at me intently, his Adam's apple bobbing several times, as if 1,000 words were stuck in his throat, finally turning into just 4 dry words. Rue, you truly are virtuous. Virtuous? I let out a soundless sneer in my heart. Wait until your virtuous wife strips away, layer by layer, the fig leaf you've painstakingly maintained for years. and exposes your unspeakable secrets to the world, then you can talk to me about the word virtuous. The day Liu Yi entered the household, he made it extremely respectable. Although her status was merely that of a concubine, I used the title meritorious for bearing offspring for the Liu family as justification, and organized it almost on par with the ceremony for a proper wife. Bright red silk hung throughout the entire back courtyard. The furniture in the bridal chamber was all top grade rosewood that I personally selected from the best furniture shop in the capital. Even the cotton inside her bedding was the softest combed fine down that I had people purchase from Jiangnan. Not only that, I also made a big show of preparing 2 large chests full of precious supplements for her. Premium red ginseng, century-old wild lingji mushrooms, Korean deer antler, bloodbird's nest, each one a nourishing treasure that was hard to buy even with a fortune on the market. Outsiders who saw this were all astounded with praise, saying that Shen Rui was truly the most virtuous and magnanimous mistress of the household under heaven, treating her husband's concubine even better than herself. Madame treats concubine Liu so wonderfully. It is practically like sisterly affection. Even the old nanny by old Madame Liu's side, who was accustomed to reading the wind, couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Only Choir knew that every time I finished smiling in front of others and returned to my own room, that smiling face would instantly turn as cold as 3 feet of thick ice. Madam, why torment yourself like this? Those good things? Wouldn't it be better if you kept them to nourish your own body? Choir felt so distressed that tears kept falling. Torment? I removed the heavy hair ornaments in front of the bronze mirror, looking at that face in the mirror that had learned to wear a mask, and smiled faintly. Choir, have you heard of this principle? In all things under heaven, excess is as bad as deficiency. This servant doesn't understand. It is fine if you don't understand. You only need to know that I've carefully adjusted the dosage of every single one of those supplements. Queer trembled with fright. Madam, you didn't put in. Don't worry, it is not poison. I waved my hand. Quite the opposite. What I gave her are all genuine top-quality tonics. It is just that I had the physician prepare them in doses far exceeding the normal amount. Kier looked completely baffled. I patiently explained. For a pregnant woman, moderate nourishment means a healthy mother and strong child. But if she continuously takes large amounts of highly nourishing and heat-inducing things like Korean ginseng and deer antler every single day without break, it will cause excessive internal heat and reverse flow of qi and blood. At best, she'll become bloated and her face will swell. At worst, childbirth will be extremely dangerous. Queer finally understood, her mouth agape, unable to speak for a long while. Besides, I added, Liu Yi is the kind of person who is vain and lazy. The better things you give her, the more she'll indulge herself to death without any restraint. I don't even need to personally watch her eat. I just need to keep sending these supplements to her courtyard in an endless stream. Not only will she not suspect anything, she'll be grateful and think I genuinely care about her. As it turned out, my judgment of Liu Yi was accurate down to the smallest detail. After Liu Yi entered the household, she immediately enjoyed this overwhelming wealth and luxury like a fish in water. Every morning she had bloodbird's nest for breakfast. At noon she ate rice soaked in ginseng chicken soup. And in the evening she had to drink a bowl of angelica and deer antler stew that I had Queer personally prepare. In less than 2 months, her originally slender and graceful figure visibly swelled up before everyone's eyes. Her cheeks became puffy, her chin turned into 3 layers, and she started wheezing when she walked. At first, Liu Heng thought it was a normal pregnancy reaction, but watching Liu Yi's increasingly bloated and misshapen appearance, his brows furrowed tighter and tighter. Yi, are you overdoing it with the supplements? He finally couldn't help but ask tentatively. As soon as Liu Yi heard this, her spoiled and willful temper immediately flared up. Brother Heng, these were all personally prepared for me by sister. She said it is for the good of our child. You can't let me and the child go hungry, right? Besides, What is in my belly is the Liu family's only bloodline. What is wrong with getting a bit more nutrition? Are you saying you despise me now? Liu Heng was left speechless by her retort. He couldn't just jump out and say stop eating, as that would be admitting even he thought the things the legitimate wife gave to the concubine were too good, wouldn't it? If word got out, people would only praise Shen Rui's virtue and magnanimity even more. And so, Liu Yi, within the brocade keiji I had carefully woven, contentedly enjoyed what she believed was heaven, sent fortune and favor, while step by step walking toward the abyss I had prepared for her. As for me, I only needed to visit her courtyard every day with a smile, exchange a few caring words, and personally deliver a bowl of steaming, hot, nourishing soup, and in everyone's eyes, I could continue being that impeccable, virtuous mistress of the household. After 10 months of pregnancy, the day of Liu Yi's delivery finally arrived. It was a stormy night with thunder and lightning. The entire Liu residence was brightly lit, and everyone was busy running around like ants on a hot pan. Liu Yi was screaming at the top of her lungs in the delivery room, those shrill cries penetrating through several layers of doors and windows, echoing throughout the entire rear courtyard. A day passed, and the child had not come out. 2 days passed, and the midwife's forehead was covered in sweat as she kept shaking her head. By the early morning of the 3rd day, with the combined efforts of several of the most experienced midwives, Liu Yi finally circled the edge of death and arduously gave birth to a baby boy. However, when the baby was brought out, everyone's expressions changed. The child's breathing was as faint as a newly hatched chick, his cries as soft as a mosquito's buzz. After carefully examining him, the doctor said 4 words with a worried expression: congenitally deficient. Even so, old Madame Liu was so excited that tears streamed down her aged face. She snatched her grandson from the midwife's hands and carefully cradled him in her arms, repeatedly murmuring, "Heaven be blessed, the Liu family has an heir." Liu Yi lay on the bed soaked with sweat and tears. Though weakened to the extreme, a trace of smug smile still hung at the corner of her mouth. She felt she had won. With this child, she would be a meritorious member of the Liu family, and the path to becoming the legitimate wife was right before her eyes. And I stood outside the delivery room, watching this scene of family celebration and warmth, as the corners of my mouth slowly curved into a cold arc. The good show had only just begun. Early the next morning, while the entire household was still immersed in the joy of a new addition, I did something that seemed perfectly normal. I brought Dr. Zhou from the Huishan Hall into the main hall. Henglang. I walked up to Liu Heng with a face full of concern, grasping his hand. "These past days you've been staying up all night after all night taking care of Sister Yi's childbirth matters. Your complexion looks even worse than Sister Yi's. I specially invited old Dr. Zhou over to take your pulse as well and give you a good tune-up." My voice was gentle to the extreme, my tone full of thoughtful and meticulous care. Anyon, who heard it, would only think this was a virtuous wife's loving concern for her husband. But when Liu Heng heard the words "take your pulse," his whole body was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly tensing every nerve. "Number. That is not necessary." He instinctively pulled back his hand, forcing a smile on his face that looked even worse than crying. "My body is quite robust. It is just that I haven't rested well these past few days. It is nothing serious." "How can that be acceptable?" Old Madame Liu immediately chimed in from the side. The old lady was immersed in the immense joy of holding her grandson, wishing the whole family would be healthy and hearty to help her produce a few more. "Hunger! Your wife went to great lengths to invite a famous doctor here. Just let him take a look at you. You are a general, the pillar of the Liu family. Your health absolutely cannot have any problems." With his mother-in-law having spoken, Liu Heng didn't dare openly disobey. Moreover, there were several distant relatives of the Liu family present, who had come specifically to congratulate them on the joy of adding a son. If he stubbornly declined, it would instead arouse suspicion. He could only grit his teeth and extend his wrist. Two burly servants I'd brought from the Shen family, who had studied martial arts for several years, stood behind Lu Heng inconspicuously. They wore smiles on their faces, seemingly standing in respectful attendance, but were actually blocking any escape route behind Lu Heng. Old Dr. Zhou was a titan of the medical community in the capital. He placed 2 fingers on the 3 pulse positions of Lu Heng's wrist and closed his eyes in concentration. The entire main hall was silent as a grave. I sat to one side, lifting my teacup and sipping the finest Beluochin tea in small mouthfuls, while the corner of my eye never left Lu Heng's face, which was gradually changing color. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, old Dr. Zhou slowly opened his eyes. His expression was extremely strange, not the usual awkwardness upon discovering a minor ailment, but rather a complex look that suppressed tremendous shock, filled with both confusion and pity. "Old Dr. Zhou, how is my general's health?" I spoke first, my tone concerned yet innocent. Old Dr. Zhou glanced at me, then at Lu Heng, whose face had turned pale as a sheet, deliberated for a long while, and finally spoke slowly. "General, this pulse." He paused, as if considering his wording. "General, you've had a cold constitution since childhood, extremely deficient kidney qi, and unstable essence gate. Based on my 50 years of medical experience, this is a congenital deficiency that you were born with from your mother's womb." He paused again, shifting his gaze to old Madame Lu sitting in the corner holding the child, his eyes full of deeper meaning. "Normally speaking, someone with this pulse would have severely damaged essence and qi with declining primordial yang. Forget about having offspring, even ordinary shuld, be beyond one's capability." As soon as these words came out, the air in the main hall seemed to freeze instantly. So quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Old Madame Lu was the first to react. Her complexion changed from ruddy to ashen, from ashen to deathly pale, and finally her lips trembled for a long while before her voice became so shrill it was distorted. "Nonsense. You quack. Me grandson is right here. Are you blind?" Divine Physician Zhou's expression remained unchanged, and with neither humility nor arrogance. He stroked his graying beard. "Old madam, please calm your anger. I stake my 50 years of medical reputation on it. I would never misread a pulse. The general's pulse indeed shows signs of congenital, unstable essence and chias for this child." He looked meaningfully at the still, weak infant in old Madame Lu's arms, leaving his words unfinished. But everyone present, the Lu family's distant relatives, the guests who came to offer congratulations, even the maids and servants in the corner serving tea and water, all understood the implication of this unfinished sentence. That child was very likely not Lu Heng's. I let out a perfectly timed gasp of shock, covering my mouth with my handkerchief, my almond eyes wide open, my face written all over with incredulous astonishment. "What, then the child in Sister Yi's belly?" My gaze slowly turned toward the direction of the delivery room. There, Liu Yi, who hadn't yet gotten out of bed due to postpartum weakness, was being supported by a maid as she stood behind the door curtain. She must have heard the commotion outside. Her face had turned deathly pale, her body trembling violently beyond control. She knew better than anyone else exactly how this child came to be. Lu Heng collapsed into the armchair, his whole person like a puppet drained of all strength. His secret, the fig leaf he had spent half a lifetime covering up, disguising, and protecting, was torn to shreds by a few words from an old physician, right before everyone's eyes. But I knew this still wasn't enough. The physician's pulse diagnosis was only speculation, although no one dared question old Dr. Zhou's reputation. Lu Heng was after all a general of the imperial court. If he refused to admit it to the death, there was still room for maneuver. I need ironclad evidence that no one can overturn, to deliver him a fatal blow. Just as the main hall descended into chaos, a servant from outside came running in hurriedly. "Madam, there is someone at the gate causing a disturbance, saying he is here to collect reward money. We can't hold him back." Oh? I feigned surprise. What person bring him in and let's have a look. The one brought in was a disheveled, ragged, middle-aged man. His tattered, coarse cloth garments, so worn they were colorless, were covered in patches and stains. His face unshaven and stubbled, looking as if he'd been wandering outside the city for a long time. But what caught everyone's attention was the delicate jade bracelet on his wrist. Though the jade bracelet was somewhat dirty, it was entirely emerald green with excellent translucency. Anyun could tell at a glance it wasn't something common folk could possess. And Liu Yi, standing behind the door curtain, the moment she saw that jade bracelet, her legs went weak, and she nearly fainted on the spot. Because that jade bracelet was precisely the personal item she had worn close to her body for many years, never once parting with it. And this disheveled vagrant was exactly the substitute that Liu Heng had secretly arranged in her previous life to continue his family line. In my previous life, this person was secretly disposed of by Liu Heng, after the deed was done, disappearing without a trace from then on. But in this life, I had people secretly search every nook and cranny of the capital months in advance, and finally found this person in a dilapidated temple outside the city. Not only did I not have him harmed, but I secretly provided him with good food and drink, keeping him well fed. At the same time, I had someone repeatedly drill an idea into his mind. You did such a huge job for them. The master's wife said that after it is done, she'll give you a large sum of silver ina to keep you comfortable for the rest of your life. You just need to go to General Liu's residence on a certain day of a certain month to claim your reward. As for that jade bracelet, it was something my people secretly switched out from Liu Yi's makeup box when she went out one time. Everything was a setup. The vagrant entered the main hall, showing no fear at all, squatting down on the ground with a thud, grinning and looking around. "General sir, this lowly one has come to claim his reward." He rubbed his hands together, his tone full of flattery and urgency. Miss Liu promised this lowly one back then, that as long as this lowly one helped her get that thing done, she'd give this lowly one enough silver to spend for a lifetime. The child has already been born, so this lowly one should get his share now, right? He pulled out a filthy jade bracelet from his chest and waved it in front of everyone. "Look, this is the token Miss Liu gave this lowly one, saying to use it as proof to exchange for silver later." Though his words were crude and blunt, every single sentence was like a sharp blade, piercing precisely into everyone's heart. The entire hall fell deathly silent. So silent that even the chirping of autumn cicadas outside could be heard crystal clear. The baby in old Madame Lu's arms suddenly cried out with a wah, sounding particularly jarring in this suffocating silence. The old madam looked down at the wrinkled little face in her arms, then looked up at that disheveled, grinning vagrant, then at Liu Yi, who had collapsed on the ground, her face ashen as death. In her mind, there was a buzzing sound, as if something had completely snapped. You all." Her finger pointing at Liu Yi trembled violently, like a withered leaf in the autumn wind. Her lips moved for a long while, letting out a wail that barely sounded human. The grandson, I painstakingly awaited, turned out to be this. She couldn't finish the sentence. A wave of intense dizziness struck. The old madam's eyes rolled back, her body stiffened and leaned backward, collapsing heavily onto the armchair, fainting on the spot. And Liu Heng, this man of unfathomable cunning, who had manipulated me at will in my previous life, finally completely broke down at this moment. He shot up from the armchair with a jolt, grabbing the teapot on the table in a nearly frenzied manner. Eyes bloodshot red, veins bulging, letting out a beast-like deep roar from his mouth as he charged toward Liu Yi, who had collapsed on the ground. "Summonon, quickly stop the general," I cried out loudly, my voice carrying just the right amount of fear and panic. At the same time, I shot a glance toward those who had already been waiting outside the door on standby. Those people were the bailiffs I had notified in advance 3 days ago through the Shen family's connections at the capital magistrate's office. With a loud bang, the main hall's door was violently kicked open from outside. Over a dozen sword-carrying bailiffs rushed in one after another, led by a magistrate from the capital magistrate's office. The scene they saw upon entering was Lu Heng with bloodshot eyes, charging at Liu Yiyi like a madman, being desperately held back in the middle by several servants. "Stop, General Liu. Committing violence and causing trouble in broad daylight. Do you intend to rebel?" The magistrate shouted loudly, and several bailiffs swarmed forward. Only by working together could they pin down the crazed Lu Heng to the ground and seize the teapot from his hands. Lu Heng was subdued on the ground, still continuously roaring and cursing from his mouth. His eyes were red as torches, the expression on his face completely twisted, like a trapped beast caged. And I stood at the very back of the crowd, quietly watching it all, my heart utterly calm. What followed was like dominoes, collapsing one piece after another. After receiving the report, the Jingzhou Prefecture conducted a thorough investigation of the Liu family. Guided by evidence I secretly provided, scandals were unearthed one after another. First, Lu Heng, as a court official, had an inherently deficient constitution, yet concealed and failed to report it, even falsely claiming in his annual performance reports to be robust in physique and full of vigor to seek higher military positions. This was the crime of deceiving the emperor. Second, to cover up his own defects and fabricate an heir to continue the family line, he secretly ordered others to commit illicit acts. This was the crime of violating human ethics and corrupting court discipline. Third, in full view of everyone, he went mad and committed assault with intent to harm. This was the crime of bullying the weak and disregarding the law. Each charge alone was enough to destroy him utterly. With 3 crimes combined, forget about his Marquis of Jingyuan title, even his head might not be spared. The court's verdict came down swiftly. Lu Heng was stripped of all official posts and titles, his estate's assets confiscated for the state, sentenced to the Ministry of Justice prison, and exiled 3,000 li yuan. The news spread, the entire capital was in an uproar. The once imposing and promising General Liu had overnight become a prisoner. As for old Madame Liu, because she suffered too great a shock, she had a stroke and was left paralyzed, unable to speak or move, only able to lie in bed, washing her face with tears every day. And as for Liu Yiyi, she was stripped of her status as a concubine of the Liu family by the government on charges of having illicit relations with outsiders and impure bloodline. And along with that child of unknown origin, was sent back to her place of origin. A woman returning to a remote countryside with such a reputation and dragging a child along. From then on, she vanished among the masses, never to rise again. Her fate, I no longer cared to follow. Have you all noticed one detail? From beginning to end, Shen Ruwei never spoke a single curse word, never flipped a table, and never even had a single direct confrontation with anyone. Everything she did appeared proper or even virtuous in the eyes of outsiders, sending supplements to the concubine, gracious and magnanimous, requesting a doctor to check her husband's pulse, considerate and caring, bringing Liu Yiyi into the household, mindful of the bigger picture. She always kept herself firmly on the moral high ground as the victim and virtuous wife, making every counterattack from her opponents seem unreasonable. This level of strategic maneuvering, honestly, is countless times more sophisticated than poisoning or arson. During the most chaotic days of the Liu family, I did something I had already planned since the very first day of my rebirth. I took out the divorce papers I had written with my own hand. Number to be precise. It wasn't divorce papers, but a letter of repudiation. I was repudiating Lu Heng. Although the Great Qi laws upheld the husband's authority as supreme, there was one extremely special supplementary clause. If the husband's family committed serious crimes such as deceiving the emperor, harming the wife's family, or concealing major faults that brought shame to the wife's family, the wife had the right to initiate divorce from her husband and could take away all her dowry plus compensation. In my previous life, I had no idea this law existed, but in this life, when I took over the Shen family's dowry shops, I had people turn the Great Qi legal code inside out committing to memory every single clause that might benefit me. On the day the divorce papers were submitted to the capital magistrate's office, Liu Heng had already been locked up in the Ministry of Justice prison. I went there in person. The cell was dark and damp, permeated with an unpleasant moldy smell. The former General Liu, who used to be graceful as jade and elegant in bearing, now wore filthy, tattered prison clothes, disheveled and emaciated. Just half a month of imprisonment had tortured him beyond recognition. The moment he saw me appear outside the cell door, his entire body shuddered violently. He stumbled up from the damp pile of straw, lunged toward the bars, and gripped the cold iron railings tightly with both hands, his 10 fingers turning pale from excessive force. Rue, you came! You finally came! His voice was hoarse and cracked, carrying an almost insane urgency. I knew you couldn't bear to leave me, that you love me. Quickly find a way to save me. I'll definitely turn over a new leaf from now on. I'll definitely treat only you well. That Liu Yiyi, you'll never see her again. Please! Please save me! As he spoke, tears and snot streamed down his face, smearing all over it. Gone was his usual composed appearance of being in control of everything. I quietly crouched down, meeting his eyes at the same level. The faint candlelight in the cell flickered on my face, making my smile appear especially bright, even carrying a hint of warmth. Liu Heng, I spoke softly, my tone like coaxing a child. You deceived me for 5 years. 5 years of contraceptive decoction, 5 years of false affection, 5 years of lies and scheming. You destroyed my best years, destroyed the last bit of kindness I had for this world. This debt. I pulled out from my sleeve that neatly written divorce agreement, and through the gap in the bars, gently passed it in, letting it fall onto the cold ground before him. We're even now. Liu Heng lowered his head, staring at the writing on that piece of paper. His whole body seemed drained of its last bit of strength. His body began trembling uncontrollably, his lips quivering, making a strange sound somewhere between sobbing and dry heaving. Rue, you can't do this to me, you can't. I can't what? My voice was still soft, as light as the first autumn leaf touching the ground, but every word carried tremendous weight. Can't treat you the way you treated me, feeding me bowl after bowl of that medicine that ruined my entire life when I trusted you most. Can't be like you were with me, holding me and saying no rush while turning around to intimately entangle with other women? Or can't look at you the way you looked at me on your deathbed and tell you, you are not worthy? Liu Heng's pupils suddenly dilated, his mouth opening and closing and opening, like a fish thrown onto shore, making its final struggle. What are you talking about? What deathbed? How could you know about that medicine? He finally realized something, those secrets that should be impossible for anyone to know, those schemes he thought were flawless. How could Shen Rue possibly know them all? Unless she had lived through it once before. Rue, who exactly are you? His voice suddenly became extremely fearful, as if through my face he was seeing some existence that sent chills down his spine. I slowly stood up, looking down from above at this man who was now curled up in a cage, so arrogant and domineering. Who am I? I am the fool who was deceived by you for a lifetime, still counting money for you even at death. I am the one who took all the blame for you, suffered all the hardships for you, and in the end didn't even have a thin coffin. My voice was as calm as an ancient well, without the slightest ripple. But now, I am Shen Rue, the only person in this life who will never be hurt by you again. Having said that, I turned around, my sleeves cutting a clean, decisive arc through the dim corridor. Rue, come back. Behind me came Liu Heng's heart, wrenching, anguished roars. Like a madman, he pounded the iron bars with his fists, his knuckles striking against the cold metal making dull thuds. But I didn't turn back. Me footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, each one farther than the last, each one lighter than the last, until they completely disappeared into the white daylight streaming in at the end of the prison. I took away all of the dowry that the Shen family had originally provided. The deeds to 3 shops, the land deeds to 500 acres of fertile fields, 2 chests of jewelry and calligraphy paintings, as well as all the private savings I had secretly accumulated over the years. Not even an embroidery needle or a sesame seed was left for the Liu family. The moment I walked out of that vermilion gate, the late autumn sunlight poured down and fell upon me. Warm and toasty, as if the heavens were brushing away all the gloom and bad luck I'd accumulated over these 5 years. Queer quickly caught up and helped me smooth down my shawl that had been blown about by the wind. "Madam? No? Miss, where are we heading first?" Kier asked excitedly. I pulled on the reins and gazed toward the distant rolling mountain ranges and the shimmering rivers. The horses' hooves crushed the thin frost on the official road, kicking up a trail of fine dust. Quire and I traveled north for a full 7 days, finally reaching that vast wilderness beyond Yumen, pass just before the first heavy snow of the northern frontier arrived. That was the first time in both my lives that I saw real snow with my own eyes. Not the kind of fine scattered snow that melted upon touching the ground within the capital's courtyard walls, but overwhelming, magnificent snow that seemed ready to swallow heaven and earth whole. The snowflakes were as large as goose feathers, falling one by one onto my eyelashes, my shoulders, my outstretched palms. Icy cold yet gentle. I looked up at the sky, spread my arms wide and on that boundless snowfield. I spun around, ran and laughed out loud like a child. Queer chased after me, panting and out of breath, shouting, "Miss, be careful not to fall." But she herself was also laughing so hard, she couldn't close her mouth. That night, we stayed in a herder's felt tent, hot milk tea cradled in my hands. Outside the tent were howling north winds and a sky full of stars. Wrapped in a thick sheepskin coat, I listened to the herder uncle humming ancient grassland ballads in a low, hoarse voice, and a sense of peace and fulfillment I'd never felt before welled up in my heart. Later, we went to Jiangnan. In the misty rain of March, I held an oiled paper umbrella and walked past West Lake's broken bridge, Suzhou's alleyways, and the banks of Yangzhou's slender West Lake. Fine rain like silk fell on the bluestone pavement, splashing tiny droplets of water, and the air was filled with the sweet fragrance of osmanthus and earth mixed together. I sat in a tea house by the water for an entire afternoon, doing nothing, just watching the black, awning boats slowly glide across the emerald green water outside the window, listening to the faint sound of pingtan coming from the distance. After that, I went to the great desert. The setting sun melts like gold, the long river like a ribbon. I rode my camel through Golden Dune. After Golden Dune, and at the edge where heaven and earth meet, I saw that single plume of smoke rising straight up. The desert wind and sand were coarse and scorching, brushing against my face like the palm of time gently caressing. Queer rode on another camel, swaying all over the place from the bumps, yet still asked me enthusiastically, "Miss, where are we going next?" I gazed at that setting, sun slowly sinking into the sea of sand, my eyes reflecting the glow filling the sky, the corners of my mouth wearing the most carefree, most composed smile of both my lives. No rush. The world is so vast. Let's take our time seeing it. Wind surged from all directions, making my robes billow and snap loudly, like a flag fluttering in the wind. I Shen Roe, spent the first half of my life trapped in a tiny cage, exhausting all my tears and devotion on someone unworthy. And now, rivers and mountains stretching for miles unfold beneath my feet. Sun, moon, and stars hang above my head, every step treading on a path I chose myself, every breath tasting of freedom. This is the life I want, needing no one's charity or pity, needing not to demean myself for wholeness under anyone's gaze. Between this heaven and earth, I have been here, I have seen, I have lived. That is enough. After reading this story, I tossed and turned in bed thinking about it for a long time, and finally came to a conclusion. This isn't a revenge power fantasy at all. This is a story about a woman who spent 2 lifetimes learning to live for herself. What did Shen Ruwei do wrong in her previous life? She was gentle, virtuous, forbearing, and kind. When her mother-in-law hurled insults, she shielded her husband, facing 5 years of infertility. She forced down bowl after bowl of bitter medicine. She met every requirement that Era had for a perfect wife. But what was the result? The more perfect she was, the easier she was to exploit. The more she endured, the easier she was to devour. Why did Lu Heng dare to be so unbridled in her previous life? Because he had her pegged as someone who wouldn't fight back. A person who never says no isn't seen as kind in others' eyes. They're seen as an easy target. So in this life, the female lead's most fundamental transformation isn't that she got smarter, isn't that she learned to scheme. It is that she finally understood one truth. Being kind to people who don't deserve it is the greatest cruelty to yourself. And that journey at the end really is the most moving part of the entire story. She didn't marry some prince or lord or powerful minister or general, didn't use another relationship to prove her worth. She simply left. To see the snow, to see the rain, to see the solitary smoke in the vast desert. Queer asked her where they're going next. And she said, "No rush, the world is so vast, we'll take our time and see." In her previous life, she lived her entire life in urgency, urgently trying to please her husband, urgently trying to get pregnant, urgently trying to prove herself in front of her mother-in-law. But in this life, she can finally not be in a hurry, because her life no longer has anyone timing her, no longer has any standards measuring her worth. She finally took back the clock of her own life. What do you think is Shen Ruwei's most core advantage for a perfect comeback? The prophetic advantage of memories from 2 lifetimes. Figuring out all of Lu Heng's schemes and secrets. Precisely planning counterattacks. B. Precise grasp of human nature. Seeing through Liu Yi's vanity and old Lady Lu's emphasis on bloodline. C. Holding the Shen family's generous dowry. Having financial confidence and manpower to support all plans. D. Familiarity with great cheese laws, finding the right clauses to back herself up, even able to legally divorce her husband. E. Patient and steady personality, pretending to be virtuous on the surface to lull opponents, secretly advancing step by step without exposure. Hurry and drop your answer in the comments. See you next time.